Okay, so this is the Bible study for Exodus chapter 32, verses 15 through 35. And the text says, Moses turned and went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. The tablets were the work of God. The writing was the writing of God, engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, "There's a sound of war in the camp." Moses replied, "It is not the sound of victory. It is not the sound of defeat. It is the sound of singing that I hear." When Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf the people had made and burned it in the fire. Then he ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. He said to Aaron, "What did these people do to you, that you led them into such a great sin?" "Do not be angry, my lord," Aaron answered. "You know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, 'Make us gods who will go before us.' As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." So I told them, "Whoever has any gold jewelry, take it off." Then they gave me the gold, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Moses saw that the people were running wild, and that Aaron had let them get out of control, and so become a laughing stock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance of the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the Levites rallied to him. Then he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap a sword on his side. Go back and forth throughout the camp, from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor." The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day." The next day Moses said to the people, "You have committed a great sin, but now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold. But now please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin." And the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron had made. Remember that you can download PDF copies of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. Number 1 says, what did we talk about in last week's study? A, Moses was delayed in coming down from the mountain. B, the people told Aaron, "Come make us gods." C, Aaron had them bring their golden earrings, and he made them an idol in the form of a calf. D, Aaron built an altar for the people to make a sacrifice. E, God told Moses that his people were turning away and he was going to destroy them and make a nation out of Moses. So all of those are true in the first part of this chapter 32 that we studied last week. Number 2, what is happening in 32:15 through 19 at the beginning of this text? A, Moses headed down the mountain with the tablets, which were the work of God and contained the writing of God. It's interesting how clear the author makes that there was something special and sacred about these because they were the work of God. And maybe that's a little foreshadowing that is being put in here. B, Joshua heard a noise and believed that Israel was at war. So he said, "This is the sound of war. There's sound of war in our camp." C, Moses recognized the sound as a party. Moses said, "That's not victory and that's not defeat. That's a party. It's the sound of singing I hear." D, when he approached the camp, his anger burned and he threw tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces. So maybe Given what we're told in A, D might be a big deal. It doesn't seem to be the main focus of this text, but it's probably something that's going to be revisited at some point. Number 3, what does Moses do about this situation according to 32, 20, and 21? A, he just let it be. No big deal. Let's move on. That's not true. It's what a lot of us want to do. In fact, I know of a situation in a church where somebody was doing something inappropriate outside of their marriage. And, there was some difficulties in the marriage, and the people were in ministry. And for a while, there was separation. And we were really hoping for and praying for reconciliation. And one day, the person that was doing those inappropriate things came back to the church, came back to the marriage, and there was a tendency to want to just sort of celebrate that, because that was good. We were thankful. But at the same time, there had been a lot of hurt in the church, where this person that was in ministry had betrayed their calling, had betrayed their faith, their spouse. And so, we weren't going to go throughout the camp and kill the person or kill people. But we did ask for a public apology, a public repentance, saying, I've done wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm not going to, I want you to go with me and be with me as I try to make amends and do the right thing from here on out. And that's all we were really asking for. And that didn't happen. The fact that we were asking and making a big deal about it, instead of just moving on, let's just forget it all and move on. We were making a deal about it, because it was a big deal, because other people were falling away because somebody they trusted and respected had fallen away. And we thought that was a big deal. And so we weren't imposing strict punishment. We weren't, all we were asking was that say you're sorry and recognize what you've done, so that we can move on with you in this reconciliation. No, we weren't going to do that. They refused to do that and left again. And we were heartbroken. That wasn't, but we couldn't make light of what had happened either. B, he ground the calf to powder and scattered it on the water and made the Israelites drink it. That is something. Yes, he made a big deal about this. C, he asked Aaron what the people did to him that he would lead them into such a great sin. And I think it's significant that he went to the person that really should have been the leader, the priest of God, who should have known better than to participate, who should have probably led them in the other direction, but certainly should not have been complicit in the sin itself. And Moses said, you led them in this great sin. So, they may have influenced you, but you did the act for them, set everything up as the priest. That's no small matter. Number 4, what was Aaron's answer according to 32, 22 through 24? A, don't be angry. It was the people's fault. Isn't that often our answer? It was not my fault. Somebody else. I one day was watching outside my office window at the Central Church, and saw one of our thrift store community service workers go into a shed that we had set up for storage in the back parking lot. And they went in there with another lady from the street that I knew about. And as soon as they went in there, I knew something was wrong. So I ran down the stairs and went out. And as soon as I got there to the shed, they heard me coming up, he took off with his pants halfway down, trying to pull him up. He jumped over the guy that was working in the thrift store community service, jumped over the fence and took off and left the lady standing there staring at me face to face. And you know what she said? It's not my fault. Oh, it's not my fault. It was him. Well, it's somebody's fault. Everybody who got involved. But that just seems to be the common. I'll never forget her just looking at me and saying, not my fault, because that is the human response when we did something that we know is wrong and we're caught. It wasn't my fault, it was him. It was them. They did it. B, they came to me, so what was I supposed to do? Yeah, you were supposed to correct them and tell them what is right and tell them that this is not what God has commanded. We have a God to lead us, to go before us. And that God lives. And if Moses is gone, that God still lives. See, when I threw the gold into the fire, the calf just sort of popped out. Must have been some kind of miracle. There's this, I think I've added a little bit of context there, or, you know, character, I guess, to the story. But he said it popped out. He threw the gold in and this calf popped out. Now we know from the story that he fashioned it, that he had tools, that that's not even the truth. But it was a way of minimizing his responsibility and his involvement in the sin, to gloss over the part where he formed it and just say, well, it came out. It was a miracle. What was I to think? Surely it was from God then. And I think we gotta, man, don't we have a tendency to minimize our responsibility? First of all, we shouldn't be complicit in sin. We should not lead others into sin. We should not engage in what we know is not pleasing to God. But if we have, we cannot minimize our involvement or try to pretend like it wasn't us. That's the opposite of repentance. That's what John is talking about in 1 John when he says, if anyone claims they have not sinned, then they're a liar and the truth isn't in them. What he's saying is that's, you're not going to be able to come to Christ by saying, I'm not very sinful. None of this was my fault. You come to Christ saying, I'm sinful. I'm the one that did this. And I want to come back and I want to change my ways. And I'm sorry. That's how you come back to Christ. That's how you come to God. But we have Aaron here minimizing his responsibility. He's not repentant. Instead, he's in denial. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of us behave when we're caught in sin. Number 5, what did Moses do in 3:25 through 29? Moses saw that Aaron had let them get out of control, but he was going to do something about it. He wasn't going to let them stay out of control. He was going to fix this. He's going to make it clear that sin is a big deal. B, Moses stood at the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And the Levites rallied to him. So he needed people who were on the side of God and not on the side of the people. Aaron had clearly been on the side of the people. Aaron had clearly entered into sin with them. He needed somebody that was going to stand with God no matter what. And so the Levites rallied to him. Moses told those who had rallied to him to strap on a sword and kill their brothers, their friends, and their neighbors, for the wages of sin is death. I've added that part at the end, but that is scriptural. It was interesting. I was just reading this morning a news story about a college coach, and NCAA investigations and things like that. And they were talking about the college's self-imposed sanctions. So the college, when they realized what had happened, put sanctions on themselves, punished themselves in hopes that when the NCAA got to the bottom of their investigation, they would find that the punishment that was imposed already by themselves would be sufficient. And at some level, that is what happened in that particular NCAA investigation. But it seems like that's what Moses is saying. We're going to take care of sin. We're going to police ourselves and not make God have to bring about punishment on all of us. Because those of us who stand with the Lord, those of us who don't want to be involved in this, we're going to stop it from being a part of our community. Now, unfortunately, Moses, even when he went up there, Moses offered to take the penalty for everybody, which is really something I think maybe that doesn't get talked about. He said, wipe me out of the book that you're writing. And God said, no, I'll wipe the ones that have sinned out of the book. That's who will. And ultimately, God did inflict punishment, because all of this ends with a plague that does come upon Israel, which is interesting because the plague was what came on Egypt when God was saving Israel. And now there's a plague on Israel. Why? Because Israel finds themselves in the exact position of Egypt, denying God, not living for God, not following God, not obeying God. So how are they different from Egypt? So a plague comes upon them. See, Moses told those who had rallied to him to strap on a sword and kill their brothers, their friends, and their neighbors, for the wages of sin is death. I already said that one. D, Moses told them, you have been set apart to the Lord today. So those that decided to stand with God have been set apart. They've been sanctified, set apart for God's purposes. They're willing to do whatever it takes if it's the will of God, and they're not going to choose their relationships over God. They're not going to choose the peer pressure over God, which is what Aaron did. And so what does it take for us to take a stand and be set apart for God? Hopefully not killing people and all of this. I don't think that that's a common thing that God calls us to do today. But I do think it does, putting him first, even at our own expense, even at the expense of our reputation, our relationships, whatever, we put him first. That's being willing to sacrifice what we want for what he cares about, sets us apart for him. Number 6 says, what did Moses do in 3:30 through 35? A, he wandered off in the desert. He was done with these people. I'm pretty sure that's what I would have done. I've been ready to do that many times in ministry. B, he told the people that he would speak to God on their behalf and try to make atonement for their sin. That is true. That's what he really did. And C, he went back to speak to God. Number 7 says, how did God respond? God said, I'm going to punish the people that have done wrong. And then ultimately, he said, now go lead the people to the place I spoke of. However, when the time comes for me to punishment, I will punish them for their sin. So he's not given up on Israel, but there is going to be a consequence. That's how God responded in this situation. The last part says, how do you think God responds today? And I think the answer is still today, he's not going to give up on us as a people. But that doesn't mean there isn't consequences for our sin. And I think that's one of the things we miss. when we think about the grace of God that's in the blood of Jesus Christ, is we have a tendency to take that for granted, and therefore continue to in sin, kind of acting as if it's not that big a deal. And what we need to understand is that even if we are forgiven, it doesn't get rid of all of the consequences of sin. There are still consequences of sin, even if we are forgiven. And even if he decides to continue to lead us and to work with us and to carry us forward, there's still consequences. So we really don't want to take it lightly, because the forgiveness might come, but the consequences are difficult to bear sometimes. And I don't believe that God, just because he saves us in the blood of Christ, takes away all the consequences of sin. Um, I know many of people have given their lives to Christ in prison, and the warden doesn't just let them out. Oh, you gave your life to Christ? Okay, go ahead, go free. There are still consequences of that sin, even if God has forgiven. Now, I'd rather be a Christian with those consequences and with God's hand on me, um, than suffer those consequences alone. So I still think it's the best thing to do to come back to him. But the reason we talk about this, because some people would say, what's the point of coming back? Who cares if I'm forgiven if I still have to deal with the consequences? No, I think you're going to be better off being with God, even with whatever latent consequences there might be. But you'd be better off if you turned to him early and didn't keep returning to your sin and having to continue to deal with those consequences. And so we really need to consider that when we're making decisions in our life, the consequence of sin that might remain even when forgiveness comes.